That's a map of the northern half of Rockland, and all of that color is land that we graze. Everything else is houses, parks, development, streets, roads. That I show you this to give you an idea how much fuel, open space stuff is woven through in the urban infrastructure. We kind of know that intuitively, right? When we have open space corridors and things, cities on the edge of forests, things like that, right? So you with me on that? Okay, so, I don't know how much cord I have. But one of my 81-year-old mentors said that I need to get a set of big flowing robes and a big cane and sandals. Well, I have flip-flops. We use a fiberglass rod because when I throw it, I don't want it to break. But I'm herding the sheep and the dog's going that way and somebody's going that way and I can't run as fast. You fling it and they'll move away from it and it doesn't break. And of course, big floppy hat. This was my brother's hat. He passed away and I got it, so I'm trying to make it last as long as possible.
Does that work for high school kids too?
It works pretty well on everything. Some people don't appreciate it. How's that? I want to thank you for the previous presentation because it gives me a number of great contrasts. If you're going to write down anything from what I say, I would encourage you to look at a book, to read a book written by a guy named Dan O'Reilly. It's called Predictably Irrational. The book talks about how we make our choices and why, and how we live in a culture where we rationalize the choices that we make, when oftentimes what we deem to be the best choice is still a terrible choice. And we should, instead of having the guts to say none of the above, like 3 cars, which one are you going to buy? You narrow it down to the car that you end up buying when you should have been buying a bicycle or something else. And some of the things I'm going to say may challenge you, and if I offend you, I'm sorry. I used to be a herbicide contractor. I worked for SPI, worked for Soper Wheeler Company, I worked for PG&E, worked for GP, LP, a bunch of them. My nickname used to be Dr. Death. I figured out how to kill brush with chemicals, chainsaws, and other things. I bought the first goats in 2006, commercial goats in 2006, and went to the woods, unloaded them in May, grazed for 30 days, took a farm advisor with me, and we went to the woods. And we went into a unit that I hadn't seen in 30 days, and we're looking at the brush, and it had about 12 inches of regrowth on it. And Glenn was saying, yeah, look at that, boy, that's all that root energy reserve coming up, and that plant's going to be really weak. If you came back in about 2 weeks and grazed the snot out of this again, you could probably kill the brush. But the catchphrase, something funny happened along the way. I had an epiphany that day. It was July the 7th, 2006. I said, Glenn, you're going to get mad at me. I don't want to kill it. I want to figure out how to turn that into money. I want to figure out how to turn that biomass into food for critters and run more of them. And he got mad. Because we've been looking at all this stuff from a destructive process point of view. Mastication, herbicides, burning. We're trying to get rid of stuff. We're trying to get it away, gone. Right? That's how we think we're going to make the woods safe. That's not how we're going to make the woods safe. We need to change the form so that what we have is safe. It was like we had this epiphany that, gosh, if we could bring critters through here every year and harvest that increment. What is particle board? It's something made out of garbage, right? What used to be waste is now used. The world now is all about recycle. 90% of the steel that we use is resmelted. Only 10% is coming out of the ground. We're big into recycling, right? Using stuff that otherwise is choking us or killing us or burying us or hurting us. Why are we not thinking about the woods the same way? Why are we still going out and using destructive process? Why are we using tractors that we put fuel in and put men on to go beat the crap out of the woods and then wait 10, 20 years for an oxidative process of destruction and breakdown? Which is why your masticated fuels have such a hard time getting back in the soil, because you're only using a piece of the equation. You're using sunlight and heat and water. You're not using a metabolic action. If you go out and run rototillers, there's more carbon being put in to do it. When we run our sheep and goats across the ground, guess what? they break that stuff down. They pee and poop on it. They put organisms into it. They accelerate the breakdown. We've known it forever, but we've taken the animals out of the equation. A lot of the old talks about the mountains talked about larger stands, more open, light fuel, the Indians lighting things on fire. There were lots and lots and lots of herds of sheep that used to winter in the valley and go up to the high country, following the feed every year and coming out in the fall. And they would light stuff on fire if it got too thick and unusable as forage. And the reason those fires didn't burn us up because they'd taken out all the flashy fuel on their way up in the spring. That's kind of, we talk about big, extensive stands and light prescribed fire versus catastrophic fire. One of the key things that's changed is we've taken the animals out. We thought we did it for good reasons. People were allowing animals to get into water where they shouldn't be and doing all this stuff. I would say to you that we have the opportunity to go back with things that we have learned in the last 20 years about animal behavior, forage suitability. For instance, manzanita has a high tannin content. We now know that if you can add alkaloids and tannins together, that they neutralize in the gut, and that the animals can actually self-regulate that. A lot of work out of Utah State. Huge body of knowledge. It's like we've got all this stuff, but we don't have a will to put the animals back in. When we try to do it, we come about it with the wrong paradigm. We're trying to use the animals as a destructive process. We're trying to bring them in, pound the crap out of the brush, and leave. And that's not going to work. So, my comments and comparisons, I always have an analogy for you. It's a comparative story. If you're trying to impress somebody that you're a good cook, and you work and work and work and work and work and work and work, and you finally come up with a great dish, you decide on beef or chicken or whatever, this great dish, and you lay it in front of them, and they don't touch it, turns out they're vegetarian. Right? We can have the best masticators in the world. We can have the best integrated destructive processes in the world, but you're still never going to catch me with my animals. Because my animals, we will actually increase the production, the assimilation of carbon out of the air. Your equation, talking about you want breakdown to be greater than increase? We want increase to be greater, but we want to keep it in the system. Do you want your retirement account to go down between the time you put your money in and you retire? Do you want it to increase? You want it to compound in a usable form and fashion, right? You with me? I hope so. Nobody's nodding their head. Nobody's giving me any feedback. I'm getting worried.
Keep going.
A classic example. We talk about shade to try and suppress fuels. To get to shade, you've got your stands so dense that you don't have any sunlight hitting the floor of the forest. What does that do to your fuel behavior, your fire behavior, crown to crown? Open the stand up, let the light, don't hit the ground. What was the commonality in all the masticated pictures? What color was the stuff on the ground? Was it green? It was brown. If all that stuff is green, when the sunlight is striking, what's it hitting? It's not hitting dead brush, it's photosynthesizing. Where are the best solar collectors in the world? Attached to a plant. How are we going to get it from where it's collected to where we want it? Through a ruminant. 10 million acres of private timberland in the state of California. We can run between 5 and 10 million sheep or goats on that land. That's a lot of meat. In the big think tank circles, they talk about by 2050, the demand for meat protein in the world is going to be double what it is today. It's not going to come out of the Great Plains. It's not going to come out of the breeding programs. It's not going to come out of the conventional ag systems. It's not going to happen. We need to think about changing our behavior on the large landscapes to our benefit, the human portion of the equation. We have to put ourselves, we have to decide that we are important. Yes, we love the animals, and we can still have them. If we make more food and the woods are safe, the critters will eat as well. And we actually have that. The turkeys run right in with our sheep and goats, and right now the little turkeys are hatching out, and the mama turkeys are puffing up and pecking the little lambs to get away from their babies. It's classic. They're coexisting. It works. We have deer. When we were in the timber, we would have deer that would come in and hang out in our goat herd. I think they were just glad to see somebody that wasn't trying to eat them. So I talked about the oxidation versus the stimulation, trees and shade, fertility, fuel breakdown. Come on, hey, I know that face. Mr. Jobson, come in, come in. 2050 meat demand, all scenarios once on fire. Every one of the scenarios that you're describing under this destructive process, once you're on fire, it's too late. I actually wrote a little blurb and sent it to Glenn after that visit to the woods that day. Imagine that instead, when the woods catch on fire, right now when they catch on fire, our tone of voice and the words we use are pretty graphic, and adrenaline is high. We're emotionally flooded, right? It's a kind of oh crap kind of a sensation. Imagine if the woods were managed in a way that the fuels weren't at catastrophic levels and you didn't have to worry about it and say, yeah, I guess we ought to go put the fire out, because otherwise today when the wind shifts, we're going to get smoke in our barbecue. Wouldn't that be a better world? But what are the things that stand in the way? Us. When I started pitching these ideas back in '07, CAL FIRE was lobbying for give us twice as many fire engines and we'll be able to put the fires out. They were spending huge amounts of money to build fuel reduction corridors. They called them fire breaks. Miles and miles of them, 400 feet wide. Somebody gave a talk and said, we're really pleased. We spent all these millions of dollars and we have an 85% success. Somebody said, what's going on the other 15% of the time? High temperature, high winds, or a combination of the two. When do you need your fuel break to work? High temperature. In other words, when you need it, it fails. So the 85% success is a falsity because it's only describing when you don't need it. And we actually talked about that when we took the SPI boss and the foresters out to that site from '06. And we said, imagine if we took that 400-foot wide firefighting equipment protection zone and widened it out to half a mile wide on either side by putting the animals in the understory so that when the fire is coming at it, we can more easily backburn and we can slow down the rate of it. Now we're doing something. It's an enhancement. So with that, I'm going to start my little talk, because a key thing, grazing as an enhancement tool in fuels management. This is a very upscale neighborhood in Lincoln called Catavadera. If you can see right there, there's a line between a lush green line and this hillside that's got a little brown in it. That's the grazed zone. This is obviously the golf course. This is where they store all the golf carts. These are custom houses, 5,000 to 6,000 foot houses, very upscale neighborhood. But look at all the dead wood in there, right? Now, if you got fine flashy fuels and you get a north wind, we got a big problem. But once I take all that fine fuel out, the fire doesn't get to that wood, problem gone, okay? Key ideas. Grazing should not replace anything, but enhance everything. Put them together. If you're going to masticate, then burn, flush the plants that can then be feed. Don't let them get big enough and to kill them and create more fuel. Put the grazers across, let their foot activity break down, right? Accelerate the breakdown of all of that woody material. The other one, understand the dynamics of the landscape and the herd. We've not done that. When we try to do these grazing things, people come up with a little pot of money, you know, $5,000 to $50,000, and they do a little project to try and do something green. Bigger is better. When I started in that previous picture, that's Catavadera next to a place called Sun City, Lincoln Hills. I was persuaded to bring my animals there when I didn't want to go there because right in people's backyards. I was previously on levees and big conservation lands and away from the urban interface. We unloaded on October 8, 2008, 570 sheep and 70 goats. Basically one semi-load of animals, 1.15 semi-load. 10-day project, 22 acres. It was a trial. It was to see if the folks, the retirees that lived there would accept the idea. On the 7th day, the boss took me aside. He said, go out front and give me a price to keep going. I want you to do the 80 acres out front. Okay. Between that date and 2012, we grew the program from 22 acres to 5,000. In 2012, we had 31 semi-loads, 14,500 animals, and 17 sites working on the first day of May. There was a lot of luck to that. The drought in the south in 2012, I had friends who had no feed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come and put their animals. And when I was taking one of them to show him where we were going to unload, and I went through the gate into the gated community, his wife said, "You put sheep in here?" She couldn't believe it, right? Right in people's backyards. The point being, bigger is better. That map I showed you, all those colors are different ownerships. I had to put those in one by one by one by one. They didn't all get in line. I wasn't, it wasn't like I was selling lemonade and everybody was waiting to sign up. I had to hustle them. I had to persuade them, and it took different agreements. The City of Rockland contract, matter of public record, we do that for like $163 an acre. That big pink one that I showed you, we do that for $10 an acre. That one used to have a requirement to participate in CAL FIRE's air tanker pool at $13,000 in case of a wind-driven fire. The fire chief has allowed us, the landowner, not to participate in the air tanker pool because there's nothing to burn anymore. So I get $7,000. He's able to sell it to his lawyer bosses because it's 90% owned by CalPERS, that he saved them money. I now make a little bit. I used to do that one for free because 7 of my paying contracts adjoin that big tract of land. That's my hub. That's where our camps are. That's where we put our corrals. You see how, so once you get it up, efficiency is generated by scale. So in your fire-safe communities, you got a small community and you try to do a 20-acre project at the edge of town. It's a great concept and it makes everybody feel good. Why not protect all of them? Why not do it all? Well, right now there's not enough animals and there's not enough appreciation for how to design and implement and put the programs together. It's education. I had 2 or 3 conversations today. Most of what's required is educating. We've got to get people to think, and we've got to get them to stop thinking the way they have been thinking about animals and fuels. Time stability is critical. I've been in that project with that map since 2008, 6 years of my life. It took 4 years to get it up to size. This year, a piece of it now is actually operated by another operator. When you're in the public arena, you have no time stability because it's public land. It comes up for rebid. I'm struggling right now in my personal life with the idea that if I'm going to invest my time and energy and breed and grow animals and develop projects that for the first 2 or 3 years don't make any money, if I have it for 10 or 20 years, when I get a chance to get my money back, yeah, time stability. Most of the grazing projects you see are a one-shot deal. You get a set pool of money out of a grant or some cost share mechanism, and they're a one-shot deal. Wrong thinking. I mean, unfortunately. Enhance rather than dominate. We've already talked about the different ways that the animals enhance and improve the system. We expect higher plant output. We actually are producing more carbon forage per acre in these lands in Lincoln and Rockland than in the stale ungrazed, because in the stale ungrazed you have a thatch overburden, just like the masticated sites. All of us, is our metabolic activity higher or lower with good exercise and stimulation? And quality of life could be moderate amount of exercise, good diet, sufficient rest, and managed stress level. A well-balanced system. Most fuel reduction activities are destructive process. I call them energy black holes. All the dollars, all the resources going in, what's coming back out? What physically is coming back out? Show me a tangible. Because fire safety is an idea, it's a state of mind. When we graze, we actually take more carbon out of the air, we're actually putting more carbon in the soil and organic matter, which as an aside, when you rototill these forested lands and you aerate the soil, what does that do to the carbon? Exposure to air oxidizes organic matter. The more you work the soil, you actually reduce your organic matter fraction. If you stop doing that and keep converting from live plant material through the ruminant gut into the ground, you'll actually increase the total carbon going into the ground out of the air. It's basic science. That sounded really bad when I said it that way, didn't it? I'm sorry, that sounded condescending. I'd like to back that up and say it in a more positive way, but I'll be here forever if I do that. Grazing is a constructive process, or should be. Don't use it as, there's a real key reason why we don't want to use animals in the destructive process. There's a reason why certain grazing projects cost so much money. We call it the rehabilitative cost. If you bring the animals in and force them to eat stuff that's not good for them, that they don't want to eat, if you take big, strong, healthy animals and pit them against undesirable herbivory, choice of food, we can consume that food down, but that pulls the animal down. It's like running a marathon. You don't do it every day. You might do it, but there's a recovery. When you get the system balanced so that we're matching the feed to the animal needs to the time of year, we try to have lambs on the ground that their mothers are making milk when the feed is green and strong. We try to have them what we call dry when the feed is dry. right? We try to match that up. That's what this slide is. These photos are not ideal, but the best photos are in my camera, which are in the other pickup 3.5 hours away. Plant, animal, human interaction. I always talk about the triangle, and I talk a lot with my hands, so now my hands are full and I can't do that. And the integrating idea that we came up with, and I say we because me and my guys, with me doing most of the talking and them putting in a few corrections and keeping me from completely destroying the thing. The plants want to do a certain thing, the animals want to do a certain thing, and we as humans want certain things to happen. We want certain outcomes. The style we use seeks to balance the three systems to optimize the net result rather than maximize the work. Where we get into trouble is when we try to maximize any one thing, right? If you're going to optimize three different things, everybody's got to realize that not everybody gets to have it all their way all the time. And again, these are basic isms, I guess you can do. This is a levee in Yolo County. These are walnut trees that are growing on that levee. Really shouldn't be there. This fence post shouldn't be there, but this is an old homestead. And the guy who lives in the house, his great-grandfather homesteaded the land. They've been there forever. The animals were right here grazing. We went in with our pole saws and we dropped the limbs off. We turned the critters loose, let them eat all the green grass, sucked the leaves off. Then we piled the brush, and I actually have more slides I didn't put in, but we actually piled the brush then and went back and burned it. So when we got done, we had a lifted canopy. We've got, you see how the post is, these fuels, we got these down because there are requirements on levees for visual inspection looking for leaks, for public safety. Got to be able to see. So normally they burn it, mow it, or graze it, which is what we do. Enhance over time. This is a preserve in Lincoln. If you go to the Firestone store and go right around the back, post and cable is in these slides right here. Wait a minute. Wrong button. That little sign is the same sign, is the same sign, is the same sign. There's 145 acres here called the Rodeo Grounds Preserve. Highway 65 is over here to the west. The shopping center is to the north. That first slide that I showed you is back up here in the hills. So, western star thistle, yellow star thistle, invasive weed. Where are the sheep? Are they eating the natives or are they eating the invasive weed? At that time of year, that is the protein. That is the best feed. Okay. This is before I turned animals, and they came in from back here, and I actually have a video, but I didn't want to show it to you because it takes too long. But it's really cool. I mean, they run and they just keep piling in, and it's almost comical. You see them coming in from the side of the screen. You know, it's 2, then it's 10, then it's 20. That's about 100 animals piled onto that patch of star thistle. That's an hour later. I mean, is that classic or what? This is what it would look like if they masticated, right? That domination mentality. Here it is a year later, growing back lush and green. Now, we call this the establishment phase. This was the first year we had a pretty thatchy condition. Medusa head was in there pretty thick. It was struggling, things weren't going well. The biologists report back as part of the conservation easement rules, right? The monitoring rules are saying the thing's going stagnant, we've got a problem. So we opened it up with the sheep. Now we've got a green functional system. This is the following year in the spring when the vernal pools are full, and we graze around through it, and we top that feed, and we've come up with a 2-pass system. We start in February, we go through all acres, top it, so that we can keep the growth curve, the sigmoid growth curve down at a more desirable state. We keep the forage at a higher quality so that the sheep do better. Do those sheep look fat or thin? I mean, look at the time of year. They're in pretty good shape. They also happen to be bred to this. They've got some Dorper genetics in them, and they're incredibly efficient critters. Go back to the slide, know your system, know your animals, know all that stuff. Bigger is better. This is a herd of commercial sheep on the Reclamation 1600 levee. If you're driving from the Sac Airport on I-5, you go over the Sacramento River and you look to the right, this is about half a mile north. That's bypass is on the left, farm field's on the right. One of my pickup is looking the other way. This is the tow drain, the Yolo County bypass that's right back here. Okay, this is a flood levee. That's how far we take it down. This is when we just, you see the dust. That's 3 loads of sheep. And they were in there for about 2 days. Grind it and move, grind it and move, grind it and move. Time stability is critical. This guy, great guy, see the house here and the house here. Put them in here real thatchy. In order to keep the animals up and to match the diet, we had to add a little bit of alfalfa. But this is how far we took it down. You go out there at that time of year and drop a match, you don't have a problem. Drop a match there, you've got a big problem. That's right over the hill on the backside of this hill. Okay? The point about time stability, it takes time to build a good system, it takes time to figure it out. It's a huge investment. As fire safe councils, you know that. You work and 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 you just get going and then something changes and you're back to nothing. It's really discouraging. But if you get enough players and you get the system big enough so that the economics work for guys like me with the grazing animals so that we don't have to charge as much. What do you think, you know, I got to ask the question, what do you think our cost was in 2012, average cost to run all those sheep? What was my recovery, my money recovery on 5,000 acres in dollars per acre? In the Bay Area, most grazing jobs are $400 and up per acre.
$50.
Boom. Pretty
Good
cool,
guess.
huh? We actually, when we started on with the 22 acres in Sun City, as we started expanding it, and I started asking, who owns that? Who owns that? How can we tie this together? And can I walk them across that? I told the boss, I said, my goal is to get it down under $100. We did it. It took 4 years. Think about your communities. If you come in and do a 20-acre project, the two biggest things that affect cost are labor and freight. If you're gonna bring animals in on trucks to do 20 acres in 5 days and then put them back on a truck, you got a huge trucking expense against very little action. Get it big. We start in February and stay till July. Those animals are there for 5 months and they walk everywhere. Now the freight is pretty cool, right? And labor. The reason we charge for this kind of work, like this, and this, you know how we created that differential between grazed and ungrazed? Portable net fence, it doesn't go up by itself. It's a labor function. I actually now am to the point in life where I can prove to you on paper, I can actually make just as much money raising sheep for meat on irrigated pasture, paying to rent the ground, as I do doing it this way. Okay? The focused grazing, when you make smaller sets, you have more fences, you have a higher labor function. So, the point being that the better you design your system and the more infrastructure you have, the more water sources that you have, the more people that you have involved, you can get your costs down to where it's affordable. The masses in California can't afford $400 an acre every year to graze. No way. The wealthy communities can. I don't live in a wealthy community. I live on an 8-acre farm. $50 is a whole lot better than $400. And we got there by just trial and error. And I did it as an exercise just to see if I could. Fire safe, gotta have a picture of fire. This is actually one of the rigs that I built for my spray business. Spent all summer building these with stainless steel tanks and a swiveling hose reel and all this other stuff. And then when the economy turned upside down, there wasn't any more spray, and I turned it into a fire truck. This levee was grazed, and then we piled the brush. Remember I told you about that? And then little boy's dream. I just gave him the drip can. He didn't want a picture taken because his hair wasn't, self-conscious. He said, yeah, that's my son. He's 19 now with a big red beard and great singing voice. Conclusions. Good grazing is a long-term process. Stretch your timeline out. You want to do good grazing, open it up. Good grazing can make fire safety more functional if you will do what the animals need instead of trying to force the animals to do what you want. That's where they've chipped right here in the head. And I always say, this is kind of one of those truisms, good grazing works. If it's not working, if the grazing isn't working, it's not the critter's fault, it's our fault. We can get there. So, that was, I hope, Dale, that was what you wanted me to hit on to the larger group. That's all I had as far as my prepared, structured stuff. Whatever you guys want to do now, it's your deal. So,
If it's okay, I'd like to
Yes.
open this up. Let's just take 5 minutes so we can stay on schedule.
yeah, and we'll have the panel in the
We're gonna
afternoon.
have that barbecue, and he's gonna be there, and let's use that opportunity to ask some questions and get some good feedback. Hopefully as a group, we're all gonna be right here along the Sacramento River, but I'm a firm believer. My family, 123 years, 7 generations now, on the family ranch down there below Merced Falls, just above Palico. They dry farm, they run a lot of cows, and they have goats, a small herd of goats, couple hundred, mostly to run along the fence lines along the county roads for fire abatement, but also so they don't have to burn the fence posts down.
There you
You've done well.
go. Yeah, there's one thing I was gonna tell you. You were talking about, I was interested, you're talking about raking the brush away from those tree crowns, a foot and a half. Where do the sheep and the goats go when it gets hot in the shade of the trees? And what do? A lot of times they make us to get down to cool moisture just by, and we call it indirect effect. You know, the thing, we're trying to solve one thing and we end up creating this other thing that we didn't even know about, and we go, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. When the critters are in the shade of your bigger trees and they're resting and they're disturbing the fuel and they're getting it away, then if you put fire through, they've done your work for you. And oh, by the way, where are they hanging out when they're peeing and pooping? In the drip, right? In the root zone of your bigger trees. So they move your energy from your open spaces to your shade just by being there and doing what they do. You had a question, yes?
Yeah, Lee, I'm a firm believer in what you're talking about, but I think that there's logistically a big challenge for us rural, mountain communities. I mean, Lincoln's a great nexus. You got the Sac Valley, you've got tons of ag, you've got accessibility to huge herds. I'm in Plumas County, so we're just so far away, so logistics are even harder.
Yes.
And obviously it's a paradigm shift that's required, and we're all facing that in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
But I'm curious about ways that we can incentivize herders to come in and get integrated, and it's going to cost a lot. It's going to take a lot of. There's not enough practitioners. That's my sense. So we need to figure out how to address that.
We use goats up here in Siskiyou County.
Yep.
First time.
With Steve, right?
With Steve.
Yeah.
I work with Steve, just right over here at the lake, and I have a place over at Sea Ranch where the Richardsons run goats
Yep.
year-round.
Yep.
At Sea Ranch and it works.
Yep.
And looking at the historical photos on Sea Ranch, you could see it was wide open. Everybody had a 360 ocean view back in the day.
Yep.
Not anymore. So the Richardsons are running goats year-round with that community.
Yep.
And it works and it's good. The one thing I'm noticing is the increaser species they have to deal with that there, and they're not, because they don't eat everything.
Right.
And up here, I knew that in Mount Shasta and Sea Ranch are a lot alike, and so I knew it was going to be a hit with the population here in Siskiyou County. And my predecessor started that, and I followed through with it to Steve. We didn't know. They don't like brush men at all. They sneeze just like I do, and they won't touch the man's and eat it. So you'll have to do some work to figure out how to treat that. We ran our inmate crews right behind the goats, and it was awesome. We were getting 3 to 4 acres, 5 acres a day with the crews because it took up all the vegetation, the leaves and stuff. We had to knock down those stalks, and it was a success. But I would like to see, the ability to do like at Sea Ranch where it's continuous, because it grows so quick up here.
Can I speak to those two things?
Yeah.
What you're describing is the maintenance phase. Getting it to the maintenance phase is more costly, the establishment phase. It's like building the house is the hard part. Keeping the house is the easier part, as long as you can make the payment.
That's the whole focus of this program.
Yes. So what we've seen lots of efforts to try and do things, and we get one-time funds and we call it the establishment step, but we haven't yet addressed, because we didn't know. I was telling the guys in the back, it's taken years to be able to monetize, to be able to figure out, to tell you it's going to take you this much money to do the first part, and you got to expect it's going to take this much money to maintain it, and you're going to justify that money because. Okay. Now, to your question, this is what I've struggled with for years. Let's say I want to expand my business. They're little critters. I go down to the bank and I say, yeah, I want to buy money to buy goats, and the banker says, no thanks. Why not? It's a great thing. He said, where's my security? I said, my animals. Really? If it's real estate, something tangible, money is attached to security. Animals by design, very liquid, very manipulatable, very disappearable, creates a problem, right? So it took years to get around that, because my 81-year-old mentor that talked about the stick, I mean, he actually was the first employee of Capital Southwest Corporation in 1963, which was one of the early mutual funds, very successful. We started with $1 million, and Cliff Osborne, the guy who put up the million, is 96 years old and still alive. These guys had a vision for the future. They bought cemetery lands and they held them for 40 years and then sold them over a long period of time at a substantial profit. Now, here's what I've come up with. I don't have any problem with the risk animals because they're mine and I understand them. But if I'm going to increase my herds, well, I have to worry about not having a place to feed them behind me. That puts me in an awkward spot. Time stability. So I was just sharing with Niels, and I wrote it down. The new idea is if we were to formulate entities or companies that had long-term agreements where we actually physically describe what's going to happen on the land. We've got all this land mass. It's going to take time and money to develop. Time to develop solar water wells. And I've actually been talking with, we actually met on the ground last year, because I'm a private guy. I don't like government, period. I'd rather do it all myself. And the Vice President Sober Wheeler said, we get that, but if you want to do this, you might need to change your attitude. Okay, SPI can't participate in EQIP because they're too big. But if a person like myself or yourself that has the animals has a long-term agreement with a large institutional landowner, guess what? EQIP can help. But what are you going to spend the money on? What are the programs they allow? Subdividing fences, interior fences. Okay? So I did this a year ago. I said, okay, the next thing I want to do in life is when I have a spare $250,000 is I want to do a 5,000 acre project. It costs $250,000 to put fence around a 5,000 acre square. Sounds horrible. $50 an acre. But if you got it for 25 years, you're amortizing that's $2 an acre. Now we're doing something. And then if EQIP comes in and helps you do the subdividing fences to break it down to smaller management units, now we're getting somewhere. Put solar wells, develop your water sources in strategic places so that you water the animals out of the drainages where you don't necessarily want them. Now we're getting better and better and better. Utah State and the others have done stuff with vegetation and nutrition. The species you're describing by themselves are undesirable, but we can manipulate that. We can manipulate behavior. We can put things on the trees that we don't want them to eat so that they don't eat it. We can put stuff on the other trees so that they will eat it. It's new. That's why you're here. It's infancy. Think, when you go home in your individual community, stop, do an assessment. What do we have? What do you have? Everybody's got something different. If you got lots and lots and lots of an item, figure out how to turn it into dollars. Isn't that how the whole corn thing, anybody read Pauline's book, you know? Corn, we are corn. It's in Fritos, you know, corn's everywhere, right? We produce lots of it. Ethanol, right? What do we have a lot of? Stuff that's kicking our butt, burning us up. Figure out how to turn it around so that it's working for us instead of killing us. Yeah. But your examples, did I answer your question at all?
Not really.
Would I ever be able to?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm just curious how we get folks like you guys how do we incentivize you guys to come up after you're Brown and Roseville? How do you come up to the mountains and
that's actually really cool. The timberland time of year.
Right. Because our timing's different, but at the same time, you know,
that is good.
How do we make it work, and how do we get the funds so we can be like, hey, we want 6,000 sheep in our forest.
Timberland should be the summer and fall leg of a three-phase program. I'm in the low country from February to July. Some of the guys that came to me in 2012, Talbot Sheep Company has been an entity in existence grazing in Truckee for 120 years. Mr. Talbot was an Englishman. It's now owned by a Basque gentleman whose family was adopted in when the father died, so they took the name Talbot. It's actually a Basque name that's in the English, Basque guy with an English name, Talbot Sheep Company. They start grazing right about now, between the 15th of May and 1st of June, and they have a run. So they go to the feed when the feed is good, and then they come back. In the wintertime, we're on alfalfa, and I was just jotting down numbers from some experiments I did. We take alfalfa and other forages that are presently just oxidizing off and going to waste, and use them to sustain the sheep. So the timber belt is good summer country. It's cooler, right? We don't want to be there in the winter, time of year. Go back to the original model. The sheep used to walk from the valley to the high Sierras. The lambs would be born in the valley, and they would go up to wherever the corrals were, and the lambs would go to market. The rams would go back and they'd breed all the way back down to their winter country. We've disrupted that with our road systems, but we now have trucks. So that thing in Rockland, where I showed you those pictures, that was part of Parker Whitney's ranch. He had 22,000 acres and 14,000 sheep. And they started right there in Rockland and went all the way up by Nyack or Soda Springs or someplace where the corrals were, and the lambs went on the train cars to go east. Rams went in and they came back down. It works. Match the animals to the nature.
We got
Yes.
time for one more
One more.
question, and then we're gonna have to roll because
We'll be
our
back.
barbecue, Rich Arm's family's waiting at noon, and some of the friends, out-of-town friends aren't here, so we'll want to be timely.
Okay, go.
Oh, I had a question about longevity, but actually, I think what I would like to also just sort of ask or mention is, obviously, cost is big. And the Forest Service right now, to do any kind of a project like that sounds great,
Yep.
but a huge NEPA document would have to probably be done to analyze it.
Yep.
And in order to get that NEPA document to go,
Yep.
you need science to
Yep.
say it's okay, and the Forest Service has compaction issues, there's so many issues. So maybe if you were with the researchers, you could.
The initial projects need to start on the private lands, allowing the
Yeah,
public
yeah,
folks
yeah.
to gather the data to put their documents
So
together.
you
Because
are-
otherwise you have a circular disconnect in the public arena, which is why we've never done it, Boom.
Okay, so that's what, that
Get
you
more
are talking
alternatives
about.
underneath
Yeah.
them.
right? That's why I don't like the public, because there's all these disconnects, right? Your NEPA document, well, give me a NEPA document. Well, I can't, because we have to graze. Well, then let me graze. Well, I can't, because you don't have a NEPA
Yeah,
document.
yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
What's wrong with this picture?
Make the picture bigger.
Yeah.
And go to the private side, we do that, right? The best collaborations are between private and public. In the old days, Extension was the public arm, working with the private people to keep all of us safe and healthy and well.
And then get something that, like I said, some of the research work
Yes.
to find out about longevity and things like
Yes.
that. Marry that
And
up.
all the other cool stuff that pops out. It's there. Believe me, it's there. I'm seeing it. I'm kind of at a point, I just turned 50. I don't necessarily want to run a whole lot of animals, but I want to help figure out how to have a whole lot of people run animals, because then it gets better for everybody. Let's go eat lunch.
Thanks, guys.